Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. It was a very welcome and pleasant surprise to find that the Rural Economy and Connectivity Committee was to review the draft climate change plan. I know that Edward Mountain spoke on behalf of the committee, but I would like to add some further thoughts of my own as a member of that committee. We covered the subjects of agriculture, transport and forestry, and it is within those three topics that I would like to share some of the evidence that we took in the hope that it might inform, influence, but also guide the government in its plan. Now, I welcome many of the Scottish Government's measures to reduce carbon emissions across agriculture, transport and forestry. I think we all agree that everyone has a role to play. But it is important to note in this debate that within these sectors are many jobs, livelihoods and microeconomies. The farmers are balancing the needs to make ends meet whilst taking into account the needs of a sustainable economy. So I too welcome the approach of the Cabinet Secretary for the Rural Economy, who prefers to encourage behavioural change rather than through enforcement. But the committee did note that the government ought reserve the right to take further steps if voluntary measures do not succeed. We also took substantial evidence, in my view, which laid bare a lack of clarity around carbon reductions. On the issue of forestry, but not only are we missing planting targets, but thought must be given to the types of forestry being planted and, more importantly, where these trees are being planted. The James Hutton Institute noted that achieving planting targets does not always equate to meeting CO2 reduction targets. Going further, they felt that the climate change plan actually presents no real target on emission reduction achieved via planting. It's no great secret that by 2050, the UK may be importing up to 80% of its timber requirements. So planting targets are about much more than just climate change. Moving on to transport. Much was said about forecasts and assumptions made by the government on the take-up of low-emission and electric vehicles. As Professor Rye outlined in his evidence to the committee on February the 8th, he said, in effect, that policy must support ambition. We took evidence on the example in Norway, where the government converted its ambition on low-emission vehicles take-up through a series of consumer policies. Low-emission vehicle purchases are pretty commonplace in Norway. But this didn't happen simply by asking or willing people to change. The government introduced a series of measures to attract ownership of such vehicles, such as zero purchase tax, reduced road tax, free public parking, no VAT, no toll fees, free access to bus lanes and so on. Now, these might not be universally popular, or indeed they may not all be right for Scotland. In fact, some of those may have financial implications on the public purse. But nonetheless, wishing something to happen doesn't make it happen. We can't rely on the environmental kindness of consumers to change their car. There must be a win-win if widespread change is a realistic goal. Equally, we can't rely on the love of the environment to get people out of their cars onto public transport. In many rural areas, such as in the west of Scotland where I live, the car is simply a necessity. But I do think that innovating for sustainability and consumer innovation are not mutually exclusive. New technologies, like smart metering, for example, is reshaping consumer behaviour in home energy, in agriculture, GPS technology, and improvements in timber felling technology are vastly improving previously quite onerous processes. Technology is similarly suited to improve public transport. Phil Matthews of Transport Scotland said to the committee that improved information sharing with the public, such as apps which show bus time arrivals, will contribute to getting people onto public transport. But even he admitted that targets in the plan were predicated on a range of unknowns. I quote from him, "There are technological unknowns, and a lot of the possible actions are predicated on action that is out with the control of the Scottish Parliament." Close quote. So in summary, I'd like to think that the Scottish Government will reflect and duly act on all the suggestions of the various committees who have spoken today. But not just them, listen to the experts and the stakeholders who are often those most directly affected by the policy implications of this plan. Thank you.